The cabin was quiet in that expensive, careful way that only first class ever is. Not peaceful, careful. The girl noticed it the moment she stepped past the curtain. She paused, just for half a second, holding the strap of her small backpack the way her mother had taught her, tight enough not to drop it, gentle enough not to wrinkle her shirt. The carpet was thicker here, softer. It swallowed the sound of her sneakers, and somehow that made her feel like she was doing something wrong just by walking. She looked up and smiled anyway, because she believed she belonged. She believed adults meant what they said. She believed rules were fair. She believed that if you followed instructions, the world would treat you kindly in return. She had checked her boarding pass 3 times already. She didn't need to look again, but she did. Row 2. Window seat, first class. The words still felt unreal, like reading someone else's name on a letter. She slid into her seat carefully, making sure her elbows stayed close, her feet tucked in. She lined up the items in her lap the way she always did when she was nervous. Water bottle on the left, folded note from home in the middle, headphones on the right. Order made things feel safe. Across the aisle, a man glanced at her, then away. 2 rows up, a woman adjusted her coat and frowned, just slightly. No one said anything. No one had to. If you're watching this right now, pause for a second and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Morning, night, somewhere in between? Because moments like this happen everywhere, quietly, when no one thinks they're being watched. The girl didn't notice the looks. She was too focused on being good, on not spilling, on not touching anything shiny that didn't belong to her, on remembering her mother's voice from that morning. Sit still, be polite. If you need help, ask nicely. She pressed the note in her lap flat with her thumb. It was short, just 4 words written in familiar handwriting. You're doing great. She read it again, even though she knew it by heart. This wasn't supposed to be a big moment. To her, it was just a flight. Just another set of rules to follow. Another place where adults knew better. She had no idea that in less than an hour, people would argue about what happened in this cabin. That strangers would slow videos down frame by frame. That words like protocol and procedure would be used to explain pain. Right now, all she knew was that her feet didn't quite reach the floor, and the seat felt too wide, and the silence felt heavy. The curtain behind her swayed slightly as someone passed through. She didn't turn around. She didn't know that somewhere behind that curtain sat a man who hadn't looked at his phone in 10 minutes. A man who was watching without staring, listening without reacting. A man who had learned, a long time ago, that systems don't reveal themselves when you confront them loudly, but when you let them act exactly as they are. This isn't one of those revenge stories where justice comes fast and clean. Not yet. This is the part before anyone raises their voice, before anyone makes a call, before the world decides whether a quiet child deserves protection or erasure. The seatbelt light clicked on. The girl reached for the buckle, careful not to make a sound. The plane eased away from the gate like it had all the time in the world. Outside the window, the airport moved in slow, organized patterns. Orange vest workers waving, baggage carts crawling along painted lines. Another jet gliding past like a floating building. The girl watched it all with wide, curious eyes, the way kids do when they still believe the world makes sense if you just look closely enough. She didn't notice the first time someone stared at her too long. It was small. A quick glance that didn't match the softness of the cabin. A look that said, "Why is she here?" without using words. The kind of look adults think children don't understand. But kids understand a lot. She felt it in her shoulders, in the way she pulled her backpack closer to her legs, like it might take up too much space if she didn't keep it contained, in the way she kept her hands folded in her lap, as if hands were the easiest thing to accuse. The flight attendant who'd greeted her earlier, Jennifer, with kind eyes and a gentle voice, came by to offer juice again and check her seatbelt. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" The girl nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you." Jennifer smiled, The kind of smile that made you feel like you were safe. "You can call me Jennifer, and if you need anything, you press the button, okay?" The girl's fingers brushed the call button on the armrest, just to feel it. She didn't press it. Not yet. She didn't want to be a problem. She didn't want to be noticed for the wrong reason. Jennifer moved on, and for a moment, the cabin felt normal again. Calm, controlled, like the first-class experience in the commercials. Everyone sipping drinks and watching movies and pretending they weren't strapped into a metal tube 30,000 feet above the ground. Then another flight attendant stepped into view, and the air shifted. She was older than Jennifer, with blonde hair pulled into a tight knot that didn't move when she walked. Her uniform looked sharper somehow, like it had been pressed within an inch of its life. She didn't smile as she scanned the seats. She assessed them, the way a manager looks at a store display. Her name tag caught the light as she passed. Diane Prescott. The girl looked away quickly, instinctively, the way you do when you sense someone might be looking for a reason to be displeased. Diane stopped near the galley, just past the curtain, and spoke to Jennifer in a voice low enough to be professional, but sharp enough to carry. "Unaccompanied minor in 2A. Jennifer's tone stayed warm. "Yeah, sweet kid, very polite." Diane didn't respond with the same warmth. "And who paid for that seat?" Jennifer blinked. "I'm not sure. It's a full fare ticket." Diane's eyes flicked back toward the girl's seat, quick and precise, like a camera focusing. That sound, just one syllable, wasn't angry. It wasn't loud, but it landed with weight, like a stamp on a document, like a decision made quietly. Jennifer hesitated. "Do you want me to—" "I'll handle first class today," Diane cut in smoothly. "You take the main cabin." Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but didn't. Not here, not in front of passengers, not in a place where hierarchy had its own invisible rules. The girl didn't hear the words clearly, but she felt the change, the same way you can feel a room get cold even before you see the thermostat. The plane lifted off, and her stomach rose with it. For a second, she forgot everything else. She pressed her forehead to the window and watched the city fall away. Buildings turning into blocks, blocks turning into shapes, shapes turning into something that looked like a map. She smiled, small and private. She took her stuffed elephant, Mr. Trunks, from her backpack and set him carefully on the blanket in her lap. His ears were worn from being held, his stitching a little uneven where she'd hugged him too hard over the years. He was familiar, safe, a piece of home she could hold without asking permission. Diane approached her row with a tray, moving like she had all the authority in the world. "Drink," she said. The girl looked up quickly. "Oh, yes, please. Apple juice, if you have it." Diane didn't smile. "We don't have that in first class." The girl's cheeks warmed. "Oh, okay. Orange is fine. Thank you." Diane poured the juice halfway. Not spilling, not shaking, just halfway. The kind of choice that wasn't a mistake. The kind of choice that said, you don't get the full pour. She placed it on the tray table with a little more force than necessary, then looked the girl up and down like she was checking for stains. "You're awfully young to be sitting up here," Diane said, as casually as someone commenting on the weather. The girl sat straighter. "Yes, ma'am." Diane tilted her head. "Where are your parents?" "My dad bought my ticket," the girl said quickly, proud and nervous at the same time. "I'm going to see my grandma." Diane's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "Your dad bought first class. For you." "Yes," the girl said. "He said I should be comfortable." Diane's lips pressed into something that wasn't quite a smile. "How nice." The girl didn't know what to do with the tone. She couldn't label it the way adults could. She just knew it didn't feel like kindness. Diane leaned in a little, keeping her voice low. "And what does your father do?" The girl hesitated. Her father had told her not to talk to strangers, but this was a flight attendant, a uniform, an adult with a badge, an adult she was supposed to trust. "He works for an airline," she said carefully. Diane's eyes flashed with something, interest maybe, suspicion. Then it was gone. How convenient, Diane murmured. The girl blinked. Ma'am? Nothing, Diane said, already turning away. Just remember to stay seated. Don't wander. Don't touch things. These seats are expensive. The word expensive hung in the air like a warning. The girl looked down at her hands, still folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't touched anything. She hadn't spilled anything. She hadn't done anything wrong. And yet, for the first time on the flight, she felt something she couldn't name. Not fear, exactly. More like a quiet understanding that this space wasn't simply nice. It was guarded. And someone had decided she was the wrong kind of person to be inside it. Turbulence arrived without warning. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies. No screaming, no alarms. Just a sudden, sharp jolt that made the cabin shudder and the overhead bins creak in protest. The seatbelt sign chimed on, its soft ding oddly calm for something that made grown adults glance up from their screens. The girl's body reacted before her mind did. Her hands flew to the armrests. Her feet pulled in closer, Mr. Trunks slid a few inches across her blanket, his worn ear slipping over the edge of the seat. She watched him with wide eyes. The plane jolted again, harder this time. A few passengers gasped. Someone cursed under their breath. The girl's heart started to race, fast and loud in her ears. She reached instinctively for Mr. Trunks, fingers brushing fabric. "Seatbelt!" The voice cut through the noise like a blade. She froze. Diane Prescott stood in the aisle, her posture rigid, her expression already tight with irritation. One hand gripped the back of the seat in front of the girl, knuckles pale. The other rested on her hip, fingers curled like she was restraining herself. I'm sorry, the girl said quickly. I said seatbelt, Diane snapped. Now! The girl's hand pulled back as if burned. Mr. Trunks slipped fully to the floor, landing on his side just out of reach beneath the seat ahead. Her lip trembled. I just dropped my... You can retrieve items after the turbulence, Diane said sharply. That's basic safety protocol. Yes, ma'am, the girl whispered. She clicked her seatbelt back into place, even though it had already been fastened, fingers shaking as the metal snapped together. Her eyes stayed locked on the floor, on the small gray shape of her elephant lying helpless and alone. The plane steadied slightly, then rocked again. Across the aisle, an older woman leaned forward in her seat, concern written all over her face. She's just trying to... Ma'am, Diane cut in without even looking at her. Please remain seated. I'm handling this. The words were calm, professional, but there was something else underneath them. Control. The girl swallowed hard. She didn't want to cry. Crying made things worse. Crying made adults annoyed. Her dad had told her that sometimes being brave meant staying quiet even when things felt unfair. So she stayed quiet. The turbulence eased after a few minutes. The seatbelt sign remained on, but the violent shaking softened into a gentle sway. The cabin exhaled. People relaxed back into their seats, conversations resuming in hushed tones. The girl waited. She counted in her head the way her grandma had taught her. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20. Her eyes kept flicking down to Mr. Trunks, still trapped beneath the seat ahead, his button eye staring back at her. Finally, the seatbelt sign clicked off. She unbuckled carefully, slow and deliberate, making sure no one could accuse her of rushing. She slid forward on her seat and knelt, reaching under the seat in front of her. Her fingers brushed fabric. Relief surged through her chest. Just as she closed her hand around Mr. Trunks's ear, the shadow fell over her again. What do you think you're doing? The girl gasped, startled. Her elbow bumped the seat in front of her, just a light tap, barely enough to register. It was enough. Diane's face twisted, something ugly flashing across it before she could hide it. Unbelievable, she hissed. Absolutely unbelievable. I'm sorry, the girl said, scrambling to sit back up, clutching Mr. Trunks to her chest. I didn't mean to. Of course you didn't mean to, Diane snapped. None of you ever do. The words landed heavy. None of you. The girl's eyes widened. She didn't understand exactly what the words meant, but she understood the way they were said, the way they wrapped around her chest and squeezed. "I was just getting my elephant," she whispered. Diane leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You're disrupting the cabin. You're creating hazards, and you're far too comfortable for someone who should be grateful just to be here." The girl's throat closed. "My dad said—" "I don't care what your dad said," Diane cut in. "This is first class. There are standards." She straightened, scanning the nearby seats, aware now that people were watching. A businessman in the front row had taken out his earbuds. The older woman across the aisle looked furious. A younger man a few rows back held his phone loosely, thumb hovering near the screen. Diane felt it. The attention. The challenge to her authority. Her jaw tightened. The plane hit another pocket of rough air, sharper than before. Glasses rattled on trays. Someone cried out. Diane turned abruptly toward the galley, irritation boiling over. The girl, frightened by the sudden movement and raised voices, slid forward again without thinking, trying to secure Mr. Trunks more safely in her lap. That was when it happened. Diane pivoted back into the aisle at the exact wrong moment. She saw the girl crouched low. She saw her small, vulnerable body out of place. She saw witnesses. And she made a choice, not a mistake. A choice. Her heel lifted. For a split second, time seemed to stretch. The girl looked up, confusion flickering across her face. She didn't even have time to flinch. The impact was brutal. A sickening, hollow sound echoed through the cabin as Diane's heel connected with the side of the girl's head. The force knocked her sideways into the wall, her body folding in on itself as Mr. Trunks flew from her hands and skidded across the aisle. Silence followed. A heavy, stunned silence broken only by the low hum of the engines. Then the girl cried out. Not loud, not dramatic, just broken. Her small hand went to her head and came away red. "Oh my God!" the older woman gasped. "What the hell did you just do?" someone shouted. The girl curled into herself on the floor, sobbing, blood trickling through her hair as she whispered the only word that made sense in her shattered world. "Daddy." The silence didn't last. It shattered all at once. Voices overlapping, seats shifting, someone shouting for help. The cabin, so carefully controlled just moments before, erupted into chaos. The girl lay curled on the floor, her small body shaking. Blood threaded through her hair, dark against her skin. Her fingers scrabbled uselessly at the carpet as if the plane itself might steady her if she could just hold on. "I want my daddy," she cried, the words breaking apart between sobs. Jennifer appeared from behind the curtain at a run. "What happened?" she demanded, already kneeling, already reaching for the girl with practiced urgency. Diane stood frozen for half a second too long. "The child was out of her seat," Diane said quickly, voice clipped, rehearsed. "There was turbulence. I tripped." "You kicked her," the older woman across the aisle said sharply, standing now despite the shaking plane. "You looked right at her and kicked her." "That's absurd," Diane snapped. "I would never— I have it on video." The voice came from farther back, calm but firm. A man held up his phone, screen glowing. "The whole thing. You didn't trip. You lifted your foot." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Phones appeared everywhere now, hands raised, lenses pointed. Diane's face paled as she realized something had shifted. This wasn't a quiet correction. This wasn't a child who could be dismissed. This was evidence. Jennifer ignored Diane entirely. She focused on the girl, gentle and steady. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" The girl nodded weakly, clinging to her elephant, now streaked with red. "It hurts," she whispered. "I know, baby," Jennifer said softly. "I know. I'm right here." She pressed a napkin gently to the girl's head, already calling out, "First aid kit, now!" Diane took a step back. "No," she said sharply. "I'm filing a report. This passenger was disruptive. She created a safety hazard." The older woman laughed, sharp and incredulous. "You assaulted a child." "I followed protocol," Diane said, louder now, as if volume could make it true. She was out of her seat during turbulence. The plane jolted again, and that was when the curtain moved. A man in a faded baseball cap pushed through from the main cabin, his face drained of color. His eyes locked onto the scene in front of him. Blood. His daughter on the floor. Her cry cutting straight through him. Everything else vanished. Maya. The girl's head jerked up. Daddy! He was on his knees in seconds, scooping her up with a tenderness that felt almost unreal, in contrast to the violence moments before. He pressed her against his chest, one hand cradling her head, the other gripping her back like he could anchor her to him. I've got you, he whispered, voice shaking despite his control. I've got you. She kicked me, the girl sobbed into his shoulder. I was just getting Mr. Trunks. The man looked up slowly. His eyes found Diane. Who did this? He asked quietly. Diane lifted her chin. Sir, your child was... I asked, he said, still calm, still deadly even without raising his voice. Who did this? The man with the phone stepped forward. I recorded it. Everything. The father took the phone, his hands steady as he watched. Watched his daughter crouch. Watched Diane's face harden. Watched the kick land. Something in his expression changed. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. He handed the phone back and stood, still holding his daughter close. What's your name? He asked. I don't have to answer that, Diane said, her confidence cracking. You have no authority. What's your name? He repeated. She swallowed. Diane Prescott, senior flight attendant. He nodded once. My name, he said, removing his cap, is Marcus Hale. A few passengers gasped. He didn't look at them. I'm the CEO of this airline, he continued evenly. And that little girl you just assaulted is my daughter. The color drained from Diane's face so fast, she had to grab a seat to steady herself. That's not possible, she stammered. Employees aren't supposed to. I wasn't here as an employee, Marcus said. I was here as a father. He turned slightly. Jennifer, get the captain. Lock down every video. Do not let anyone delete anything. Then he looked back at Diane, his voice dropping. Don't move, he said. Don't speak. Don't even breathe loudly. He glanced down at his daughter, brushing her hair back with a gentleness that nearly broke him. Baby, he murmured, be brave for me, okay? She nodded, trusting him completely. Around them, the cabin was silent again, but this time, it wasn't shock. It was fear, because everyone could feel it now. This wasn't ending quietly. This was only the beginning. The captain arrived with a face that said he already knew this flight was about to change his career. Captain Reynolds stood at the edge of first class, eyes moving quickly, from the blood on the child's temple, to the shaken passengers, to Diane Prescott standing rigid and pale. He'd flown long enough to recognize the smell of disaster before it fully ignited. What's going on? He asked, though his gaze had already settled on Marcus. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This flight attendant assaulted my 8-year-old daughter, he said evenly. There's video, multiple witnesses, and I want her confined immediately. Diane found her voice at last. Captain, this is being blown out of proportion. The child was out of her seat during turbulence. I tripped. I didn't trip, the businessman from the front row snapped. You kicked her. I have it from 2 angles, another passenger added, already emailing files to himself. Cloud backups included. Captain Reynolds held up a hand. Enough. He turned to Diane. Ms. Prescott, you're relieved of duty for the remainder of this flight. You can't do that, Diane said, panic leaking through the cracks. I have seniority. Union protections. This is a misunderstanding. You will comply, the captain replied flatly. Or you will be restrained. Choose. Diane looked around the cabin, at the phones, the witnesses, the blood-stained napkins. Her shoulders sagged. Marcus tightened his hold on his daughter as Jennifer carefully checked the wound again. She needs medical attention as soon as we land, Jennifer said quietly. Possible concussion. We'll divert if necessary, the captain said. No, Marcus replied after a beat. We're closer to our destination. Get emergency medical and security waiting at the gate. The captain nodded once. Done. As Diane was escorted toward the rear crew area, her composure finally shattered. This is ridiculous, she protested. You don't even know who she is. You're overreacting because… Marcus didn't let her finish. No, he said calmly. You're facing consequences because you chose cruelty. Diane disappeared behind the curtain, her protests muffled, her authority gone. The cabin exhaled. Marcus sat back into the first-class seat, his daughter still in his arms. She trembled now that the adrenaline had faded, her small fingers clutching his jacket. Daddy, she whispered. Did I do something wrong? The question cut deeper than any accusation. No, he said immediately, pressing his forehead to hers. You did nothing wrong, not a single thing. But she said, I don't care what she said, he interrupted gently. You belong anywhere you have a ticket. You belong anywhere you exist. The older woman across the aisle leaned over, eyes fierce and kind at the same time. I'm a retired nurse, she said. May I help? Please, Marcus said, grateful beyond words. As ice was wrapped and placed carefully against the swelling bruise, Marcus felt the eyes of the cabin on him, not as a CEO, not as a powerful man, but as a father who had almost failed his child by trusting the wrong system. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. The plane leveled out. The engines hummed steadily again, as if nothing had happened. But everything had happened. In the cockpit, the captain made a quiet call to headquarters. Legal, security, crisis response. He spoke in low, urgent tones, already understanding that this wasn't just an incident. It was an exposure. Back in first class, Marcus's mind raced. He thought of the complaints he'd skimmed over, the reports that never reached his desk, the anonymous email 3 weeks earlier that had warned him his airline had a problem with people, not planes. He'd wanted to believe it wasn't this bad. He'd been wrong. Jennifer returned with water and a blanket, her eyes rimmed with anger. I'm so sorry, she said softly. This should never have happened. Marcus looked at her. You tried to protect her. That matters. The girl shifted slightly, wincing. Daddy, am I still going to Grandma's? He swallowed hard. Yes, baby. Grandma's waiting. She nodded, satisfied, then frowned. Is she going to jail? Marcus paused. I don't know yet, he admitted. But I promise you this. She will never hurt another child on one of my planes. Ever again. The girl relaxed a little at that, trusting him the way only children can. Around them, passengers whispered, some angry, some shaken, some already thinking about lawyers, reporters, consequences. Phones buzzed quietly as messages were sent, videos uploaded, truths released into the world where they couldn't be buried. Marcus felt it then, the shift. This wasn't just about his daughter. This was about a system that had protected the wrong people for too long. And as the plane began its descent, Marcus Carter made a decision that would cost him money, power, and sleep, but would give his daughter something far more important. Proof that justice wasn't just a word adults used. It was something you fought for, even when the fight burned everything down. When the wheels touched the runway, the cabin didn't clap. Nobody celebrated a smooth landing. Nobody joked about finally being on solid ground. The plane rolled forward in a tense hush, like everyone understood they were arriving in two places at once, an airport and the beginning of something bigger. Marcus stared out the window and saw the vehicles waiting near the gate. Not just one airport security cart, several. 2 uniformed officers, a supervisor, and a man in a dark jacket with a badge clipped to his belt that didn't look like airport police. Federal. His stomach tightened. Good. Let it be real. Let it be on record. Let it be impossible to bury. His daughter shifted in his arms, sleepy from shock and exhaustion. The bruise at her temple had already turned dark, the swelling pushing her skin up in a way that made Marcus's throat close every time he looked at it. Daddy, she murmured, eyes barely open. Are we there? We're here, baby, he said softly. Just stay with me. The plane docked. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, but no one stood up. Not at first, because the officers boarded immediately, stepping into the aisle with calm, practiced authority. Their eyes went straight to Marcus, then to Jennifer, who nodded toward the rear of the plane. A second later, Diane Prescott was escorted forward. Handcuffed. Her hair was looser now, her uniform slightly rumpled, her face tight with a panic she couldn't hide. She tried to keep her chin up, tried to look like a wronged employee, but the cuffs made the truth visible in a way words never could. As she passed first class, her eyes flicked to the girl in Marcus's arms. For a split second, something flashed across Diane's face. Anger, fear, humiliation. Something that wanted to blame the child for everything that was happening to her. Marcus stood, not because he wanted a scene, because his body refused to stay seated. "I want 1 minute," he said to the man with the badge. "That's all." The agent hesitated, then nodded. 1 minute, no contact. Marcus walked into the aisle and stopped just close enough to see her clearly. Diane swallowed hard. "Mr. Carter—" "Don't," Marcus said quietly. She flinched like the word had slapped her. "I don't want your performance," he continued, voice low so only she could hear. "I don't want your excuses. I want one honest answer." Her eyes darted to the officers, then back to Marcus. Why?" he asked. "Why did you do it?" Diane's mouth opened, closed. You could almost see her calculating, searching for the safest explanation, the one that would soften consequences. Marcus leaned in slightly. "For once in your life, tell the truth." The cabin was silent behind them. Phones were still up, lenses still pointed. Everyone waiting for the moment they'd replay later. Diane's jaw trembled, and then she said it. Because she didn't belong there. The words were small, almost quiet, but they hit like a punch. Marcus stared at her. "Say it clearly," he said, voice still controlled. "Who didn't belong?" Diane's eyes flicked away. Her throat bobbed. Silence was her answer. "You mean a black child," Marcus said. "You mean my daughter." Diane said nothing. The agent's recorder was already on. Marcus nodded once, as if the last piece of a puzzle had clicked into place. "You know what's funny?" he said softly. "My daughter has flown first class since she was 2. She's shared meals with diplomats. She's sat next to people with Nobel Prizes. She belongs anywhere she wants." He took a step back. "The question isn't why she was in first class. The question is why you were." Diane's eyes filled with tears. Not remorseful tears. Frustrated tears. The tears of someone who'd gotten away with something for so long, she'd forgotten consequences were real. The officers guided her forward again. As she passed Marcus, she whispered, desperate, "I'm sorry." Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're sorry you got caught," he said. "Not sorry you hurt her." The words followed Diane down the aisle like a shadow. Then she was gone, escorted off the plane, swallowed by the doorway and the swarm of procedure waiting beyond it. Marcus turned back to his daughter. She was watching him now, eyes heavy but alert. She'd heard enough. Kids always do. "Daddy?" she asked quietly. "Did she really think I didn't belong?" Marcus knelt to her level, even though his knees wanted to buckle. "Yes," he said, "because lying would make it worse." She thought that. The girl's face tightened, confusion and pain mixing in a way no child should have to carry. "But I had a ticket," she whispered. "I know," Marcus said, voice thick. "And that's why this is wrong. That's why this can't be a quiet thing we forget." Airport medics approached with a stretcher, but Marcus shook his head. "She'll walk," he said gently, then looked at his daughter. "Only if you want to. Do you want to walk, baby?" She nodded, gripping Mr. Trunks with both hands like a lifeline. She stood slowly, wobbling slightly, and Marcus's arm wrapped around her immediately, firm and protective. As they stepped off the plane, the terminal lights seemed too bright. The world too normal for what had just happened in the sky. But Marcus wasn't thinking about the cameras gathering at the gate. He wasn't thinking about the stock price, or the board, or the lawyers already drafting statements. He was thinking about one thing. His daughter had been hurt, and his company had allowed it. That meant the fight wasn't over when Diane Prescott left in handcuffs. That was just the first cut, the real justice, the kind his audience believed in, the kind that cleans the system instead of just punishing one villain, was going to take fire. And Marcus Carter was done being polite about it. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and quiet. Machines hummed softly, steady and indifferent, while a monitor traced gentle green lines across a screen beside the bed. The girl lay still beneath a thin white blanket. Mr. Trunks tucked under her arm like a guard who refused to leave his post. Marcus sat in the chair beside her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles ached. The doctor had been calm, professional. Mild concussion, no fracture, she'll be sore, she'll be scared, she'll heal. Heal. The word sounded too simple for what had been taken. The girl stirred, her eyelashes fluttering before her eyes opened. She squinted at the bright room, then focused on him. "Daddy?" "I'm right here," Marcus said instantly, leaning forward. "I didn't go anywhere." Her brow furrowed. "Did we land?" He smiled softly. "We did." She shifted slightly, then winced. Marcus's chest tightened. "Easy," he murmured. "You're safe." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then the questions came, careful and heavy. "Am I in trouble?" "No," he said without hesitation. "Absolutely not." "Did I break a rule?" "No." "Did I make the plane unsafe?" Marcus reached out, gently brushing her hair back from her forehead. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing." She stared at the ceiling, blinking fast. "Then why did she hurt me?" There it was, the question every parent dreads, the one with no answer that doesn't bruise something permanent. Marcus took a breath, slow, steady. "Because," he said carefully, "some people carry anger and fear inside them, and instead of dealing with it, they put it on others, especially people who are smaller. Or different." She turned her head to look at him. "Because I'm a kid?" "Yes." "And because I'm me?" she asked softly. Marcus met her eyes. He didn't dodge it. "Yes," he said, "because of how you look. And that is wrong. Completely wrong." She was quiet again, chewing on the truth like something sharp. "That's stupid," she finally said. Despite everything, Marcus laughed. A short, surprised sound. "It really is." Her fingers tightened around Mr. Trunks. "Grandma says stupid people are everywhere, but we don't let them make us stupid too." Marcus swallowed hard. "Your grandma is very wise." A knock came at the door. His mother didn't wait for an answer. She swept in like a force of nature, gray curls pulled back, eyes blazing the moment she saw the bruise on her granddaughter's temple. "My baby," she said, crossing the room in 3 strides and pulling the girl gently into her arms. "My sweet baby." The girl relaxed instantly. "Hi, Grandma." "I should have been on that plane," his mother said fiercely, shooting Marcus a look that was half anger, half relief. "I'd have—" "Mom," Marcus said gently. She exhaled, nodding once. I know. I'm here now." Behind her, Marcus's phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. He stepped into the hallway to answer. His assistant's voice was tight. "Sir, the video is everywhere." Marcus closed his eyes. "How bad?" "CNN, BBC, every major outlet. The headline is already forming. Airline CEO's daughter assaulted on his own plane." Marcus leaned against the wall. "And the board?" he asked. Silence for half a second too long. "They're concerned," she said carefully. "Legal wants to manage messaging. PR is drafting a statement about an isolated incident." "No," Marcus said. There was a pause. "Sir?" "No statements minimizing this," he said, voice steady. "No isolated incident. No quiet resolutions. I want everything." "Everything?" she repeated. Yes, Marcus said. Her personnel file, every complaint, every incident, every email. I want to know how someone like her stayed employed long enough to hurt my child. That could expose— I don't care, he said. If this company failed passengers before my daughter, then my daughter doesn't get to be the only one who matters. Another pause. Understood. He hung up and went back into the room. The girl was sipping water now, her grandmother watching her like a hawk. "Daddy," she said softly, "are you mad?" He knelt beside her bed. "I'm not mad at you. I'm mad that the world let someone hurt you." She nodded. "Are you going to fix it?" The question wasn't demanding. It was trusting. Marcus felt the weight of it settle squarely on his chest. "Yes," he said. "I am." "How?" He thought about the airline. The complaints he hadn't read closely enough. The systems designed to keep things quiet. The people who'd chosen convenience over courage. "I'm going to make sure," he said slowly, "that no one like her ever gets protected again. Not on my planes. Not by my company." She considered this. "Will that make people mad at you?" "Yes," Marcus admitted. She frowned. "Even rich people?" "Especially rich people," he said with a faint smile. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's okay. Grandma says doing the right thing usually makes someone mad." His mother snorted softly. "Smart girl." Marcus looked at his daughter, tired, bruised, still brave, and something inside him locked into place. This wasn't about revenge. This was about responsibility. About proving to his child that when the system fails you, you don't shrug and move on. You make it change. Outside the hospital room, lawyers were assembling. Cameras were setting up. Board members were whispering about stock prices and damage control. Inside, Marcus Carter held his daughter's hand and made a silent promise. The next time someone tried to tell a child she didn't belong, the system itself would answer back. And it wouldn't be gentle. The conference room on the 32nd floor had a view designed to calm people down. Glass walls, neutral colors, a skyline that reminded you how small everything really was. It was the kind of room where problems were usually softened with careful language and resolved with phrases like moving forward and lessons learned. Today, it wasn't working. Marcus sat at the head of the table, hands folded, expression unreadable. Around him were 12 people who technically worked for him. Board members, legal counsel, senior HR, crisis management. Every one of them had a tablet open. Every one of them avoided looking directly at the screen in front of Marcus. Because the screen showed his daughter. Not crying, not screaming, just sitting on the floor of a first-class cabin, blood in her hair, confusion on her face. The video paused on the exact moment before impact. "Let's be very clear," the general counsel said carefully, breaking the silence. "This is serious. But we need to manage exposure. There are ways to contain this." Marcus didn't look at him. "Explain contain." The man cleared his throat. "We suspend the employee. We issue a statement expressing concern. We cooperate with authorities, and internally we bury it," Marcus finished. A murmur moved around the table. "That's not what I meant," the counsel said quickly. "We protect the company." Marcus finally looked up. His gaze was steady, cold. From what? From liability, from reputational damage, from a shareholder revolt. Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay, then let's talk about protection." He tapped the tablet. The screen changed. A list appeared. Complaint number 1, complaint number 2, complaint number 3. The dates stretched back 15 years. "What is this?" a board member asked. Marcus's voice was calm. "Every formal complaint filed against Diane Prescott." The room shifted. "That can't be complete," the head of HR said. "Our records show only 2. Marcus swiped again. Emails appeared. Internal memos. Redacted reports with familiar language highlighted in yellow. Unsubstantiated. No further action recommended. Passenger credibility questionable. "I pulled these from the archive server," Marcus said. "The one no one checks unless they know where to look." The head of HR went pale. That server is where you put things you don't want to deal with, Marcus finished. Silence. How many of these involved children? Marcus asked. No one answered. He leaned back. I'll tell you, 9. And how many involved race-based complaints? Still nothing. 12, Marcus said. Out of 14. The crisis manager spoke up. Marcus, if this gets out, we're talking class action territory, FAA oversight, possibly federal. Good, Marcus said. Several heads snapped up. Good? Someone repeated. Yes, Marcus said. Because what you're all proposing right now is exactly how my daughter ended up on that floor. The general counsel tried again. We're not defending her actions. We're saying the company can't survive full exposure. Marcus's jaw tightened. Then maybe, he said quietly. It shouldn't. That landed hard. A board member laughed nervously. Come on, that's dramatic. Marcus leaned forward, palms flat on the table. Let me be very clear. Someone in this company decided that complaints like my daughter's were an inconvenience. Someone decided silence was cheaper than accountability. Someone decided a child being hurt was a manageable risk. He looked around the room, meeting eyes one by one. And now you're asking me to help you do it again. No one spoke. The door opened. An assistant stepped in, face tight. Sir, we have a problem. Marcus didn't turn. Define problem. The video wasn't just uploaded, she said. It was mirrored. Multiple servers. International. It's already been analyzed by independent experts. The crisis manager closed his eyes. And there's more, the assistant added. A former flight attendant just contacted the press. She says Diane wasn't the only one. She says complaints were rerouted on purpose. A ripple of panic moved through the room. The head of HR whispered, That's not... Marcus held up a hand. He stood slowly. This meeting is over, he said. Effective immediately, I'm authorizing an independent audit. Full access, no NDAs, no internal filters. The general counsel stood as well. Marcus, you don't have unilateral authority. I do, Marcus said. Check the bylaws. Someone did. The room froze. Additionally, Marcus continued, every executive who touched these files is placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. That's half this table? Someone whispered. Marcus nodded. I know. Phones started buzzing. Stock alerts. Media requests. Texts from people who suddenly remembered his name. The system, the one that had smiled politely and nodded and hidden its rot, was finally realizing it couldn't control this. Not anymore. As Marcus walked out, his phone buzzed again. A message from his daughter's grandmother. She asked if the bad lady was gone. Marcus paused in the hallway, surrounded by glass and steel and consequences. He typed back, Not yet, but she will be, and she won't be the last thing we fix. He put the phone away and kept walking. Behind him, the company he'd built was beginning to crack. Not because of one violent act, but because, for the first time, the truth was no longer negotiable. The truth didn't come from a courtroom. It came from a child's voice, replayed in a room full of adults who had spent their lives learning how not to listen. Marcus stood alone in the dim media review suite, the walls lined with screens. Lawyers and auditors filled the seats behind him, quiet now, pens forgotten. On the largest screen was a paused frame from the flight, his daughter, small and shaken, clutching her elephant. Play it, Marcus said. The technician nodded. The video rolled again. Not the moment of impact, not the kick. Everyone had already seen that. This was earlier. It was a secondary clip, recorded accidentally by a travel vlogger sitting 3 rows back. The camera wasn't pointed at the aisle. It was pointed at himself, rambling about airline food. The audio, however, was crystal clear. Diane's voice drifted in from off-frame. These seats are expensive. Then his daughter's voice, small and polite. I know. I'm trying to be careful. A pause. Diane again, sharper. Careful isn't the same as belonging. Marcus felt the room tighten. The video continued. You could hear turbulence in the background, a clink of glass, someone laughing far away. Then his daughter said something no report had mentioned, something no edited summary had included. "I'm allowed to be here. My dad said so." Her voice didn't sound defiant. It sounded like she was reminding herself. Diane replied, low and unmistakable. "People like you always think that." The technician stopped the video. No one spoke. "That line," Marcus said quietly, "was never in the incident report." The lead auditor cleared her throat. "It was omitted." "By whom?" She glanced down at her notes. "By 3 layers of review." Marcus nodded slowly. "Because that line changes everything." A lawyer behind him shifted. "It establishes intent." "No," Marcus said. "It establishes truth." He turned to face them. "My daughter didn't understand policies. She didn't understand power, but she understood something every adult in this room forgot." He looked back at the frozen image on the screen. She knew she belonged. The auditor spoke carefully. "We cross-referenced this clip with internal logs. That vlogger's upload timestamp predates the first edited report by 7 minutes. So the system reacted," Marcus said. "Not to protect a child, but to protect itself." Silence confirmed it. "And this," Marcus continued, "is why none of your procedures worked. Because they weren't built for justice. They were built for plausible deniability." Another screen lit up. A timeline appeared. Complaints, transfers, reassignments, language patterns repeated across years like fingerprints. Marcus's assistant spoke softly. "We found something else." She pressed a button. An internal training memo filled the screen. Old, forgotten, buried. Guideline. When dealing with potentially disruptive passengers, assert authority early to maintain cabin hierarchy. Hierarchy. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. The room felt smaller now, heavier. "This," he said, opening them again, "is what hurt my daughter. Not one woman's foot, not one bad decision." He gestured at the screens. "This." The lead auditor nodded slowly. "With this evidence, the company cannot argue isolated misconduct." "That's the point," Marcus said. A junior lawyer swallowed. "Sir, this will trigger federal oversight, shareholder lawsuits, possibly criminal referrals." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Good." He turned off the screen himself. When he walked out, his phone buzzed. A text from his daughter. "Daddy, Mr. Trunk says he's not scared anymore." Marcus stopped in the hallway, the noise of a collapsing system buzzing around him. He typed back, "Tell him thank you. He helped us tell the truth." And for the first time since the flight, Marcus allowed himself to breathe. Because the system had finally been caught doing the one thing it could never explain away. Silencing a child who was right. The fallout didn't come all at once. It came in waves. The first wave hit the markets before sunrise. Marcus stood in the quiet of his office, tie loosened, coffee untouched, watching numbers slide across the screen. Red arrows. Percentages ticking downward. Analysts talking over one another on muted televisions, using words like instability and leadership risk. By opening bell, the stock was down 11%. By noon, 14%. His phone rang constantly. Board members, investors, politicians who hadn't returned his calls in years. He let it ring. Every time. Because somewhere 3 floors below, a team of independent auditors was opening files that had never been meant to see daylight. And upstairs, in a conference room with no windows, the people who'd once spoken confidently about managing exposure were starting to understand what exposure really meant. "Sir," his assistant said, stepping into his office, voice tight. "The unions are pushing back." Marcus didn't look away from the screen. "Of course they are. They're calling it a witch hunt," she continued. "They're threatening work stoppages if disciplinary action goes beyond Diane." Marcus finally turned. "Then they're admitting it was never just Diane." She hesitated. "Legal says if we pause the audit now, we could stabilize." "No," Marcus said. "If we pause now, we prove them right." She nodded and left. An hour later, the second wave hit. 3 senior managers were escorted out of the building, not fired yet, but placed on leave pending investigation. Security badges deactivated. Company emails locked. The kind of quiet removal that usually never happened at this level. By mid-afternoon, the press had names. By evening, they had patterns. Marcus watched the headlines scroll. Internal memos reveal pattern of suppressed passenger complaints. Airline faces federal review over child safety and discrimination claims. CEO refuses settlement, orders full transparency. The board convened an emergency session. This time, no one joked. No one smiled. A director leaned forward, voice strained. "Marcus, you're burning the house down." Marcus folded his hands. "No, I'm opening the windows." "You're costing us billions," another snapped. Marcus nodded. "I know." "And for what?" the first director demanded. "One incident?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He stood. "My daughter was injured on one of our planes," he said evenly. "But she wasn't the first. She's just the one who couldn't be silenced." The room went still. "I've read every complaint now," Marcus continued. "I've watched the footage. I've heard the language your teams used when they thought no one was listening." He looked at each of them. "You want to talk about cost? Let's talk about the cost of doing nothing." Silence. The general counsel spoke quietly. "If we proceed, we lose the arbitration shield. Insurance may withdraw." Marcus nodded again. "I'm aware." "And if insurers pull out," another director said, "we ground half the fleet." Marcus met his eyes. "Then we ground half the fleet." A murmur rippled around the table. "That's madness," someone whispered. "No," Marcus said. "That's accountability." The vote came. 7 against him, 5 with him. Under normal circumstances, that would have been the end. Marcus reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table. "Before you finalize that," he said calmly, "you should read this." They opened it. Silence stretched. One director's face drained of color. "These are shareholder agreements," Marcus nodded. "Clauses triggered by ethical breaches and public misrepresentation." The general counsel swallowed. "You can't be serious." "I am," Marcus said. "If this board votes to suppress findings, these clauses activate automatically." Someone laughed, brittle and shocked. "You planned this?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. "I planned to protect passengers," he said finally, "including my child." The vote shifted, slowly, reluctantly, but it shifted. By the time the meeting ended, the decision was irreversible. Full cooperation with federal authorities. No settlements without admission of wrongdoing. Mandatory retraining. Zero-tolerance enforcement. Independent oversight for 5 years. The cost projections updated. Worse than before. Marcus signed anyway. Late that night, he sat alone in his office, city lights glowing below. His phone buzzed. A message from his daughter's grandmother. She asked why you look tired on TV. Marcus smiled faintly and typed back. "Tell her it's because fixing broken things takes energy." He set the phone down and leaned back, finally letting the weight settle. This was the price. Not applause, not praise. Loss, anger, consequences. But somewhere in a quiet hospital room, a little girl slept without wondering if she'd done something wrong. And for Marcus Carter, that made every number on every screen worth paying. The courtroom wasn't loud. No shouting, no gasps, no dramatic pounding of gavels like in the movies. Just the soft shuffle of papers, the hum of the air system, and the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. Marcus sat in the second row, not at the front. He'd chosen the seat deliberately. He didn't want his presence to tilt the room. He wanted the truth to stand on its own. His daughter sat beside him, feet dangling above the floor, Mr. Trunks tucked under her arm. She wore a simple blue dress and a headband that barely covered the faint yellow shadow of the bruise that still hadn't fully faded. She looked smaller here, but calmer. Diane Prescott sat at the defense table. No uniform, no authority. Just a woman in a gray suit that didn't quite fit, shoulders hunched, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She didn't look at the gallery. She didn't look at Marcus. She stared straight ahead, like if she focused hard enough, the room might disappear. The judge adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "We are not here," she said evenly, "to debate whether a child belongs in first class." A murmur rippled through the room. "We are here," the judge continued, "to determine whether a system designed to ensure safety instead enabled harm." Marcus felt his daughter's fingers curl into his sleeve. He squeezed her hand gently, a silent reminder. "You're not alone." The prosecution laid it out calmly. No theatrics, just facts, timelines, language patterns, internal emails that used words like manageable risk and brand exposure when referring to human beings. When the video played, the unedited one, the room went still. Not the kick. The moment before it. The part where Diane said, "Careful isn't the same as belonging." The judge closed her eyes for a brief second. When the defense spoke, their words sounded thinner, technical, focused on policy interpretations and stress and years of service. None of it touched the truth sitting quietly in the second row. When the verdict came, it wasn't explosive. It was final. Diane Prescott was barred permanently from working in commercial aviation. Criminal charges would proceed separately. Civil penalties followed. The union protections she'd hidden behind for years dissolved under the weight of documented intent. But the judge didn't stop there. She looked directly at the representatives of the airline. "This court finds," she said, "that the harm in this case was not isolated. It was cultivated." The word landed heavy. Remedial oversight will be enforced. Independent monitoring, mandatory reporting, and any future suppression of passenger complaints will be treated as obstruction. The gavel came down softly. It was over. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Microphones, questions shouted from every direction. Marcus shielded his daughter with his arm, but she stopped walking. "Daddy?" she asked quietly. "Yes, baby?" She looked back at the building. "Is it done now?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "The hurting part is done," he said. "The fixing part will take longer." She nodded, accepting that in the way only children can. Later that afternoon, they sat in a small park across the street. Autumn leaves drifted down around them, the city moving on like nothing monumental had just happened. His daughter sat on the swing, pumping her legs slowly. "Daddy," she said, eyes on the sky, "do you think she hates me?" Marcus took a breath. "I think," he said gently, "she hates being wrong more than anything else." She thought about that. "That sounds sad." "It is," he agreed. She kicked her feet once more, then said, "I don't want to be like that." Marcus smiled, throat tight. "You won't be." Across the city, the airline released its final statement. Not polished, not defensive. It admitted failure. It outlined changes. It named the harm. The stock dipped again. And then, slowly, something unexpected happened. People wrote in. Flight attendants, passengers, parents, children who had grown up learning to stay quiet. They didn't ask for revenge. They said thank you. That night, as Marcus tucked his daughter into bed, she held Mr. Trunks close and whispered, "Daddy?" "Yes. I'm glad you didn't make it quiet." Marcus brushed her hair back. "Me too." She smiled, already drifting off. "Grandma says quiet can be powerful, but only if it tells the truth." Marcus turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a long moment. The world outside was still loud, still messy, still unfair in too many places. But inside that room, something had healed. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to believe that dignity, once defended, had a way of spreading, even at 30,000 feet. 6 months later, the airport felt different, not quieter, not softer, just different. Marcus noticed it the moment they stepped through the terminal. There were new signs now, small ones, easy to miss if you weren't looking for them. Clear language, plain promises. A line about dignity and safety that didn't sound like it had been approved by 10 lawyers trying to say nothing. His daughter noticed something else. A flight attendant knelt in front of her as they waited to board, lowering herself so their eyes were level. "Hi there," she said gently. "Do you need anything before we get on the plane?" The girl hesitated, then shook her head. "No, thank you." The attendant smiled anyway. "If you change your mind, you let me know. That's what I'm here for." She stood and moved on. The girl looked up at her father, eyes wide. "She was nice." Marcus nodded. She was. They boarded early, not because of status, but because a gate agent quietly waved them forward without making it a spectacle. No stares, no murmurs, just movement. When they reached first class, the girl stopped. For a moment, Marcus felt his chest tighten, but she didn't freeze. She walked in. She chose her seat. She buckled herself in. And then she did something small that felt enormous. She took Mr. Trunks from her backpack and set him on the armrest, right where everyone could see him. No hiding, no shrinking, just existing. Marcus sat beside her this time, not behind a curtain, not observing from a distance. Beside her, like he should have been all along. As the plane taxied, she leaned over. "Daddy?" "Yes." "Do you think this plane is safe?" Marcus thought about the audits, the lawsuits, the executives who'd resigned quietly, the policies rewritten by people who finally understood they weren't abstract. "I think," he said slowly, "it's safer than it was. And I think people are paying attention now." She nodded, satisfied. Outside the plane, the world kept spinning. The airline's stock never fully recovered. Some investors never forgave him. Marcus lost friends who liked him better when he'd stayed silent. He gained critics who called him reckless, emotional, weak. He didn't correct them, because something else had happened too. Other companies followed, quietly at first. New reporting systems, independent monitors, real consequences. Not perfect, never perfect, but moving. Letters came in by the hundreds, then thousands. Parents, flight attendants, teachers, kids who'd grown up learning to make themselves small. They didn't talk about revenge. They talked about relief. They talked about the moment they realized someone had finally said, "This isn't acceptable." Marcus kept one letter in his desk drawer. It was written in careful handwriting, clearly by a child. "Dear Mr. Carter, my mom says I don't have to be scared to tell the truth anymore. Thank you." On the plane, the seatbelt sign chimed. The girl reached for the buckle, confident now, practiced. As the plane lifted into the sky, she pressed her forehead to the window and watched the ground fall away. She smiled, not because everything was fixed, but because she knew something important, that when something wrong happened, it didn't have to be quiet. Halfway through the flight, she turned to Marcus. "Daddy?" "Yes?" "Do you think the bad lady thinks about me?" Marcus considered that. "I think," he said carefully, "she thinks about consequences now." The girl nodded. "That's good." She settled back into her seat, headphones on, Mr. Trunks tucked under her arm. Outside, clouds drifted past, endless and indifferent. Marcus watched her breathe, steady and unafraid. He thought about how close he'd come to choosing the easy path, the quiet one, the one that would have protected him and failed her. He was glad he hadn't, because dignity, he'd learned, wasn't something you give speeches about. It was something you defend when it's inconvenient, when it costs you, when it would be easier to look away. The plane leveled off. The cabin settled into its familiar rhythm, and somewhere between takeoff and cruising altitude, a little girl closed her eyes, safe enough to sleep. Not because the world was suddenly kind, but because someone had decided that this time it would be held accountable.